When we work with Excel, or when we just work with a lot of data in general, it happens quite often that we have to search for something. In our example, we have a sheet 2 and we have some names on sheet 2. And we want to search for the items that each salesperson sold on sheet 2. And our source, so the data for it, in which we can search, is on sheet 1. So what we want to find is, for example, how many items Olivia Anderson sold, and if I go back to sheet 1, then I can find Olivia Anderson here in row 7, and the result that I want to see is 1,400. Now, of course, what I did now is not very efficient, especially when you have 100,000 rows. A slightly more efficient way would be pressing Ctrl F. This provides a find and replace box, and I can search for Anderson, for example, and I can say find next. I could also say find all, and then Excel shows me all the cells that have the value Anderson inside them. Now we only have one. It also shows me the workbook in which this value was found, the sheet on which the value was found, the cell, and the value itself. Okay, so this is slightly better, but still not really good if there are 100,000 rows on sheet 1 and 2,000 rows on sheet 2, for example. I will not search for values 2,000 times. We will of course use a function for this, but before we do that, I want to show you also the replace functionality. I will replace the word Parker, or the name Parker, in cell A9. I will say find Parker and replace it with silver, for example. Now I can click on options, and then there will be some more options that I can use for replacement. For example, I can say that the case has to be matched, and in this case only a lowercase Parker would be replaced with a lowercase silver. However, I don't want to do that, so now the Parker with an upper P will be replaced by or with silver. We can also say that we want to match the entire cell contents, so in that case the cell would only be able to contain Parker for a successful replacement, And we have some other useful options. For example, we can search within a sheet or within the entire workbook. We can search by rows, or we can search by columns. And we also have the look-in option, but now we only have the formulas option here, so it doesn't really matter. But this doesn't mean that it will look only in formulas, so it will look everywhere. And actually we don't even have a formula on this sheet. I can replace all Parkers with silvers. I have only one Parker, so let's go for replace all. And Excel gives us feedback that all done, we made one replacement. This should not be plural, but it is. However, it doesn't really matter. What happens is that one replacement was made. So now you see that we have Sarah Silver instead of Sarah Parker. But let me undo that with Ctrl Z. Okay, so now we know about the search and replace functionality in Excel, but this is not what we need now. Now we need a function that can find the sold items of these salespeople in this table. And this is the VLOOKUP function. The V stands for vertical, and lookup is basically another word for search. Let's see how VLOOKUP works in action. So I will select cell B2 on sheet 2, and I will insert the VLOOKUP function. Okay, I found it. Double click. Let's read the description of the VLOOKUP function. It's in the middle. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in an ascending order. The first sentence is important for us now. We have to provide a table or a range of cells to VLOOKUP. And of course we also have to search for something, so we will search for Olivia Anderson. Now VLOOKUP will search for Olivia Anderson in the leftmost column of the table or the range that we specified. And if there is a match, so if VLOOKUP finds Olivia Anderson in that leftmost column, then it returns a value from another column that we specify. But let's go ahead step by step. The first argument is the lookup value. So the lookup value is the value to be found in the first column of the table and can be a value, a reference, or a text string. Now a string is just another word for text actually, or a series of characters. Now the lookup value will be a reference in our case, cell A2. However, this reference contains text. So you see that Excel already processed it as Olivia Anderson. Now we need to provide the table, so the table array argument. Table array is a table of text, numbers, or logical values in which data is retrieved. Table array can be a reference to a range or a range name. Let's provide a range. So let's go to sheet 1. And then let's say that we will provide from A1 to E18. Now we have the call index num argument. It is the column number in table array from which the matching value should be returned. The first column of values in the table is column 1. It is important that the range we provided is from A1 to E18, and the salespeople are in column A, so this is the leftmost column of our range. If the salespeople were not be in the leftmost column, VLOOKUP would not work. VLOOKUP will look for the value Olivia Anderson in the leftmost column, so in column A. For the call index num, we have to provide the column index of the sold items column. The sold items are in column C, so the range starts with A, this is the first column, B is the second, and C is the third one, so I have to put a 3 here. You see that Excel already found the correct value for us, but we are not finished. We have a range lookup argument as well. If we omit the range lookup argument, then Excel will find the closest match. Later, we will talk about what Excel understands as a closest match. But now, and most of the times when I use VLOOKUP, I want to find an exact match. An exact match is what the name suggests. So if Olivia Anderson, exactly this text, is not in our source table, so in the table where we are looking up the values, then no result will be returned. We see that now even a closest match returns the correct value for Olivia, 1400. But it is not always the case. To force an exact match, I can either put a 0 here, which evaluates to false, or I can just type false here for the range lookup argument. This of course also evaluates to false. True and false are special keywords that we can use in our functions. If a value can be either true or false, we say that it is a Boolean value. I will click OK, and we will see what the function returns, and it returned 1400, so our function is correct. We can check sheet 1, and we see that 1400 only appears once in column C, and it indeed belongs to Olivia Anderson. I will change the value false here, and I will type a 0 here. You see that the result has not changed. It is still the correct result. I like 0 better than false because the formula reads a bit more easily. Let me add another Olivia Anderson at the bottom of our table. I will just copy this row and paste it here. However, I will change the sold items to 10,000. Let's get back to sheet 2. Because I've added a new row to my table, I have to adjust my table array argument. So now the correct range is A1 to E19. Because the second Olivia Anderson is now in row 19 of the first sheet. I'll press enter, and notice that still 1400 is returned. So the sold items of the first Olivia Anderson are returned. When we work with VLOOKUP and there are duplicates in a table, like now, then VLOOKUP always returns the first value, so the first value that it finds, the first Olivia Anderson in this case. Not 10,000, but 1,400 is returned. If you're working with VLOOKUP, it's important to check if your table has duplicates. Before we move on with VLOOKUP further, I want to talk a bit about the search functionality in Excel. And though the search functionality is very useful in Excel, it is quite limited when you have to work with a lot of data. So previously I told you that you can use the shortcut Control F to activate the search functionality in Excel, or to activate this find and replace box. I will close this down, and actually in the Home tab, in the Editing command group of the ribbon, you have this Find and Select button. You can click on it, and you can click on Find, and the same box or functionality appears. One last thing that I want to mention, I think I forgot to mention, is that if you find something, so let's say that I will find Brooks, so I will find Grace Brooks in cell A4 by clicking on Find Next. And you might have seen that actually the cell was selected where Excel found the first match. If there were more matches and I clicked on the Find Next, then it would go to the second match. But now if I click on Find Next, it just stays on cell A4, so cell A4 is still selected because this is the only match. And if I search for something that Excel will not find, for example, I will search for Freeman, and if I click on Find Next, this warning appears that Excel couldn't find what I was looking for. And I can click Options for more ways to search. I will click on OK now, and I will close this box, because I won't talk about searching and replacing more. But now it's time that we move on with VLOOKUP. So we left off at finding Olivia Anderson successfully with VLOOKUP. Actually, we found the sold items by Olivia Anderson. If I drag or copy over this formula to cell B3, something will happen that will make me unhappy. VLOOKUP found the items sold by Jessica Stone successfully, but I'm still not happy. The problem is that the formula was adjusted, so the range was adjusted. Now VLOOKUP is searching from A2 to E19 instead of A1 to E18. Now Jessica Stone is still found, however, this is not always the case, and we just cannot let the formula behave like this. It is too inconsistent. For this we have three solutions. The first solution would be making the range an absolute range. But that topic comes later in the course, so we will not do that now. The second option is to provide the entire columns to VLOOKUP. So instead of A1 to E18, I will just have A colon E. And VLOOKUP successfully finds the sold items of Olivia Anderson. We don't have to refer to specific cells when defining the range, we can use columns as well. And if I drag this now the formula is not adjusted. Because I copied or dragged the formula to one row below, Excel is not modifying anything about the columns. But what if I drag the formula to cell C2? We get an error, an NA error, but what is more important, that the lookup value was also adjusted, so it adjusted +1 column, so now it's trying to find 1,400 instead of Olivia Anderson. But more importantly, the columns were adjusted as well, the column range. So instead of A to E, we have B to F. This is not necessarily a big deal actually, because it is quite unusual that we would drag a VLOOKUP formula to the adjacent column. But it can happen, and we should find a solution for this as well. Okay, let me delete the contents of cell C2, and let's get back to cell B2. I can provide the named range our table to VLOOKUP, and that should solve our problem. So let's search for our table. It's there. I can double click on it. Let's press enter, and it looks good. Let me drag it to row 3. It's good. And let me drag it to C2, sorry. Now we still have the error because still the lookup value was adjusted. However, our table named range is intact. We will need to adjust the cell reference here, but the topic of cell references is quite big and VLOOKUP itself is quite a big topic, so we will not discuss it now. Okay, let me delete the contents of cell C2, sorry. Let me get back to cell B2. Before drawing over the formula to the rest of the salespeople, let me just show you step by step what is happening in this formula. I think VLOOKUP is a relatively simple formula, but if this is the first time you meet with it, I think it would be beneficial if I showed you in the actual table what was happening. By actual table, I mean the source table. Now let me just copy this formula text here, and let me go back to sheet 1, and I will put the formula into cell A20, and I will start with a single quote so the formula will not be evaluated. And instead of A2, let me actually just say Olivia Henderson. And instead of our table, I will go with A, E, so columns A, E. Okay, so we see the formula, the underlying formula. This is of course not evaluated because I forced it to be a string with this single quote. But let's see what happens. So we have the value Olivia Anderson. We want to search for this value. And we tell Excel that we want to search for this value in the range of columns A to E. Now don't forget that it is very important with VLOOKUP. This is a serious limitation actually of VLOOKUP, but it will always search in the first column, so in the leftmost column of the range that you provide here. So Excel will search for Olivia Anderson in column A. So Excel searches, and this is not Olivia Anderson, this is not Olivia Anderson, blah blah blah, and in cell A7 finally, Excel finds Olivia Anderson. Now our third argument for the VLOOKUP function is the index of the column whose value we want to be returned. So we provided this range to Excel from columns A to E, and we told Excel that if you find Olivia Anderson in the leftmost column, so in column A, then return the corresponding value from column C, so from the third column of the range. So Excel returns 1400 to us. And the last argument, is 0, or the false value, tells Excel that only return the value if Olivia Anderson is an exact match. So basically when Excel started searching, Excel said that okay, I will search for Olivia Anderson and Olivia Anderson exactly. If the name is not Olivia Anderson exactly, then I don't find anything. However, if I do find an exact match, so if I find Olivia Anderson here, then I will return the value from the third column. Let's start with deleting the contents of cell A20. Let's get back to sheet 2. Now in sheet 2 we have the VLOOKUP formula or function, but we are using the R table named range, and this is good. So let's do what? Let's just copy or drag the formula over to the 3 cells below as well. Okay, now this doesn't look so good. Let's check cell B4. Okay, so the sold items of Sarah Parker were found. We are referring to our table, so the table on sheet 1, and we want to get back the value from the third column, and it has to be an exact match. So we got back what we expected. But what about Peter Jackson? The formula actually looks good. An error was returned, which means that no value was found or no value could be returned, so Peter Jackson was not found in column A, or in the leftmost column of our range. And this is actually true. There is no Peter Jackson in sheet 1 or on sheet 1. We have a Jane Jackson in cell A17 and a Jane Jacksons on cell A18, but no other Jackson or Jacksons. So actually, this is fine. This is fine. So Peter Jackson was not found, and this is what was expected. But what about Jane Jackson? She is there in the table. So she is in cell A17 and she sold 2,000 items. However, we get an NA error. Let's look at the formula bar. So, okay, it's VLOOKUP. We are searching for A6, which is Jane Jackson. So far, so good. Now the range is our table. This also seems to be good. We want to take the value from the third column. This is also good. And we want an exact match. Okay, everything seems to be fine. Then what can be the problem? And the problem is that I added Jane Jackson to the table after I defined the our table name. So actually our table refers to the range A1 to E16. And these two rows are not included in it. If this was an inserted table, so if I went to insert and table here, then there would be no problem because the range is re-referenced automatically when I add rows to it. But my named range, our table, does not re-reference itself automatically when rows are added to it. So let's go to the name manager. And let's change the reference so it would go to cell E18. I have to click here. Then I will swap the 6 with an 8. And I have to click on this check mark or tick. Now my reference has been changed, so I can close this box. And let's check what happened. Good. Our formula has been updated. And now the correct value has been returned. Let's talk about exact and approximate or closest matches. I sorted our table by the names of the salespeople alphabetically. On sheet 2, I already applied the VLOOKUP formulas for the exact matches. When we are searching for exact matches, actually it doesn't matter if the column in which we are searching for is sorted or not. If there is an exact match, it will be found. If not, then it won't be. All the names in column A have exact matches, as you can see by the results. It's worth taking a quick look at the formula just to confirm that everything seems to be okay. So we are searching for value A2. We are searching on sheet 1 between columns A to C. It looks good. We return the value from the third column, so from column C from this range. And we are going for the exact match. So everything seems to be fine so far. And if I go to cell B3, then you see that the reference has changed to A3. So we are good here. Now let's say that based on the sold items, we want to give bonuses to the salespeople. In columns E and F, you see a very small bonus table. If the salesperson sold 1,000 items, then the bonus is $100. I mean, at least 1,000 items. If a salesperson sold at least 2,000 items, then the bonus is more, of course, $250. And if the salesperson sold 3,000 or more items, then the bonus is $400. You see that the number of sold items don't exactly match our bonus table. Jane Jackson sold 2,000 items and Jane Pearson sold 1,000 items, and actually Sarah Parker also sold 2,000 items. If we were to use exact matches, then these people would have matches, but the other people would not. Let's actually confirm this. Let's put the formula into cell C2. Let's just type the formula, so let's not use the insert function functionality now. So we have VLOOKUP, and we are searching for the value 800. Now we have to put a comma. We are searching in the range EF, so columns EF. We want to get back a value from the second column from this range, so from column F. And let's get an exact match. So we have to go with false. Let's type a closing parenthesis and enter. So as expected, no exact match of 800 was found in this table. Now let me just double click on this cell. I mean the bottom right corner of this cell when we have this nice cross symbol. So our formula has been copied down. And indeed, only 3 exact matches have been found. But there are a lot of people who would still be eligible for bonuses. We have a Jane Jackson's who is not eligible for the bonus based on this VLOOKUP formula. However, she sold 8,000 items, so she would be eligible for the maximum bonus of $400. Paul Rode as well, he sold 7,000 items, so he should get $400. And we also have Kelly Masters for $250, and Olivia Anderson should also get $100, and so on and so on. Let's see what happens if we change this VLOOKUP function so that it would go for an approximate or closest match. So we have to simply change our 0 to 1. Actually, I could also put true here as well. Let's read this text that pops up. Approximate match. The values in the first column of the table array must be sorted in ascending order. What this means is that the values in column E now must be in an ascending order. And they are indeed in an ascending order. Approximate matches only work properly if your data here, so the data in which you are searching for the value, is in an ascending order. Instead of the 1, of course, I could also type true, but I prefer the number 1 because the formula is a bit shorter this way. So let's press enter. Okay, nothing changed for Grace Brooks, but it's not a problem because she sold less than 1,000 items, so we actually don't want to give her a bonus. But let's drag the formula down again. And now you see that the bonus calculation, or the bonus lookup, is working as intended. Jane Jackson's gets the maximum bonus along with Paul Rode, and Jessica Stone also gets a bonus, and Sarah Parker also gets a bonus of $250. And there are more salespeople who got bonuses, but I think you got the point. And we have 3 people who are not eligible for bonuses, so we got an error back instead of a result. And indeed, they are not eligible for bonuses because they didn't sell at least 1,000 items. Let's discuss how this approximate match logic works. AXA refers to approximate or closest matches, but this terminology is a bit misleading. Based on the terminology, by approximate match, we would assume that we would find something for Grace Brooks here. She sold 800 items, so it's very close to 1,000, so 1,000 should be an approximate match. And she should get $100 bonus. Or in the case of Jessica Stone, who almost sold 2,000 items, we could actually assume that she would get a $250 bonus. Because 1,800 is much closer to 2,000 than to 1,000. But the logic is different for the approximate matches. What happens is that we take the value 800 from Grace Brooks, and VLOOKUP starts searching for the closest match. However, the first match, 1,000, is bigger than 800. And VLOOKUP assumes that our data is in ascending order, which means that if 1,000 is bigger than 800, then the rest of the values where we search for 800 must be even bigger than 1,000. So Excel stops here at 1,000 and says that, okay, there is no match for 800. If the value to be searched for is less than the first value in our column, then there is no match. What happens with 2,000 is that Excel starts searching, so 2,000 is bigger than 1,000, so Excel searches further, and in the next row, Excel actually finds the exact match. So even though we are not searching for exact matches, Excel says that, okay, I found 2,000, so this is the closest match, and we return 250. Let's see what happens to Jessica Stone's 1,800. So Excel starts searching. 1,800 is bigger than 1,000, so it searches further. However, the next value is already bigger than 1,800. So it returns the previous value. And this is what this approximate or closest match logic means in Excel. So Excel searches until it finds a value that is bigger than the value to be searched for. And when it finds the first value that is bigger than the value to be searched for, then it will return the preceding value. And you see that the same thing happens with Kelly Masters' 2,500 sold items. So Excel sees that 2000 is less than the value to be searched for. However, the next value, 3000, is greater than the value to be searched for, so Excel returns the corresponding value to 2000, which is a bonus of $250. And of course, if there is a value that is bigger than the greatest value, then the corresponding value for the greatest value will be returned. That's why Paul Rode gets a $400 bonus, along with Jane Jackson's. Later we will discuss how we can show a nicer message than this error message if no value has been returned. However, in this scenario, we can deal with it in an alternative way as well. I will simply cut these 6 values, so I will press Ctrl X, select cell E3, and I will just paste the cut values. And into cell E2, I will put a 0, and the error message already disappeared, and a 0 has been returned, and we have a corresponding empty value here, or blank value here. So if I put a 0 into cell F2, still a 0 is returned for the people who are not eligible for a bonus. But we can also say that, okay, even if people who sold less than 1,000 items can get a bonus of, let's say, $30. And the formula has been updated automatically. But of course we can also say that, okay, if someone sold 0 items, then we don't want to give that person a bonus, so the error message is fine. But if someone sold at least 100 items, then the bonus should be the minimum 30. So nothing changes here because actually even Peter Floyd sold 500 items. But the important thing here to note is that if you have a default value and you're working with numbers, then you can type a 0 here as the first value, and you can be sure that a default value will be returned. Before moving on, I will ruin my table a bit. So the values will not be in ascending order, so I will just copy 3000 here into cell E2, and you see that the function is already ruined, but let me just put 0 here into cell E5. So you see that if the values here in the searched column are not in an ascending order, then the function just doesn't work properly. And you might also notice that my description of how the value is searched for was quite simplified, and this is not actually what happens when we are searching for an exact or an approximate match. So you see that our data is not really make sense now because Jane Pearson is not eligible for any bonus. However, she should be, and Jessica Stone is not eligible for bonus either. There are some people who get the correct bonus, like for example Jane Jackson and Sarah Parker. But our results are basically ruined. And you might have also noticed that my explanation of how VLOOKUP finds the values was quite simplified, and it only made sense when the values were in an ascending order. Because actually Kelly Masters, for example, sold 2,500 items, which is less than 3,000. However, not an error is returned, but VLOOKUP tried to match it with the other values as well. And in the end, she got the maximum 400 bonus. But the important thing to remember here is that approximate matches only work if your data is sorted. Otherwise, you cannot be sure about what Excel will return for you. Previously, we talked about approximate matches. We were searching for numbers, and when searching for numbers, the approximate match logic can make sense. Provided, of course, that the data in which we are searching is in ascending order. We will search for text values now, so we will search for the names of the salespeople and not for numbers. And you will see that when searching for text, then the closest match or approximate match logic can return very, very strange values. Of course, not strange from Excel's point of view, because it is just following the logic. But for us, they seem strange and illogical and weird. Notice that the names are in an ascending order, and we are interested in rows 7 and 8, so in Jane Jackson and in Jane Jackson's. And Jane Jackson without the S sold 2,000 items, and Jane Jackson's with the S sold 8,000 items. Let's go to sheet 2. Where I already typed in a VLOOKUP formula with approximate matches. So you see the one at the end means that we are searching for approximate matches. The correct values are returned because there is a Jane Jackson in the table and there is also a Jane Jackson's in the table. So the exact matches have been found even though we were satisfied, or we would have been satisfied with approximate matches. But what happens if I delete the N from Jane Jackson? Now we have an incorrect result, so let's see where this 800 comes from. It's coming from row 6 from Grace Brooks. But Jane Jackson is right under Grace Brooks. So VLOOKUP found Jane Jackson with an N and determined that it's greater than Jane Jackson without an N. So it returned the preceding value, Grace Brooks, with 800 sold items. And this seems to be strange because, of course, we would think that an approximate match would match Jane Jackson with Jane Jackson. But previously we saw how the approximate matches work, so actually it's not that surprising. What is important to note here is that when working with text, it can be quite risky to work with approximate matches. If I change this formula or function to an exact match, we will correctly receive the NA error because there is no Jane Jackson in the table. And of course, if I change this formula as well, function, to an exact match, then we still get back the correct result because we have a Jane Jackson's in the table. So my suggestion is to use exact matches when you're working with text. If, when searching for approximate matches, VLOOKUP would search based on probability, we would say that VLOOKUP is doing a fuzzy search. A fuzzy search would be that we have Jane Jackson and it is almost Jane Jackson, so there is only one character difference, so probably we meant Jane Jackson. This would be the fuzzy way of searching. But it's quite important to know that this is not what is happening in Excel. There is a good chance that you will use VLOOKUP a lot while working with Excel. So it's very important for you to know the difference between searching for exact matches and approximate matches.